Hello and welcome to Stretford Paddock. My name is Joe and this is a one-on-one interview. I'm here with football finance expert from the University of Liverpool, Kieran Maguire. Great to have you on the channel again.
Thanks very much for the invite, Joe. Always a delight to come onto the paddock.
Yeah, great. Thanks for coming on. Unfortunately, it's not particularly fun and nice stuff that we get to talk about whenever you come on. And obviously today we're going to be talking about the Glazers, the ownership, the sort of, I don't know if debacle is the right word, but certainly saga that is, I think we're 11 months into this process now and we seem to know just as little as we did at the start. But let's get into some of the updates since we last spoke. So we saw an article over the weekend, I think it was the Daily Mail, and they had reports from Football Insider, I believe it was, that essentially said the Glazers are strongly considering or are going to take Manchester United off the market because they believe that United could be worth a lot more money in the coming years. Talks of a fee around 10 billion were sort of suggested in that article. Now, there haven't been an official statement to back this up, and some people are suggesting it could be a business tool to try and get more leverage. But what do you make of that idea? And first of all, how feasible do you think that possibly is that they could ever get that much from Manchester United?
Well, I think there's been a lot of smoke and mirrors from the Glazers following their initial announcement around about 11 months ago that they were interested in talking to people. They never said the club was definitely for sale as a whole, but they didn't say that it wasn't either. And clearly we've been through this charade, this pantomime over the course of the last 10 to 11 months. There's been no new news coming from the two sets of buyers. I think they've got fed up. They both feel that they've made fair offers, substantially less than 10 billion. Where the Glazers have got this figure from, initially it does seem rather strange because nobody denies that Manchester United is a bigger club than, say, Newcastle, but Newcastle were bought for 300 million. So that makes Manchester United worth 33 times the value of Newcastle United. That doesn't seem right. Then you look at Chelsea. Chelsea went for 2.5 billion. And look, there's lots of reasons to dislike Chelsea. But at the same time, the stadium's in a prime piece of real estate in a very desirable part of London. They have been successful on the pitch, whether you like them or not. And to say that Manchester United is worth 4 times, again, initially, that seems a bit strange. So there must be something driving the Glazers' opinion. And in my view, I suspect it's increasingly linked to what they've seen happening at clubs such as Barcelona. Barcelona are selling off 25% of future TV monies. They're selling off 49% of licensing. And they're getting a lot of cash for this. And I think the Glazers have done their sums and they say, well, Manchester United is as big a club, if not bigger than Barcelona. And therefore, if we add together all of these tiny bits of the club, which we could set off in sections, we think that overall it could be worth more than the figures that are being quoted for the club as a whole. But on a business fundamental, if I nerd out on a spreadsheet, I'm not getting anywhere near any of these numbers. Could it be that somebody's pitched to the Glazers and said, we've got artificial intelligence coming in, we've got VR coming in. If you put those two things together, we know that Manchester United have got a huge fan base all around the world. And we've started to see, over the course of the summer, players with cameras in their shirts. Now, would somebody be willing to pay $5 a time or $10 or whatever it's going to be, and they can watch the match through Bruno Fernandes's shirt, through the goalkeeper's shirt, whoever it's going to be, and then you can switch shirts. Can you see that? I think if that comes true, you have got a more valuable business, but we're a long way off that at present. The Glazers don't need the money now, though. They've been taking dividends out of the club. They've been flogging shares when it has suited them, so they don't need the cash. And they are convinced it's worth more than everybody else does.
I mean, I can almost imagine the phrase digital season ticket being rolled out over the next 15, 20 years in some capacity. I don't know what it is, but you can imagine that. Every game live for $1,000 a season or whatever. That could definitely happen. I want to get to the transfer window in just a second and what we've seen there and the sort of seemingly unique position United have found themselves in compared to other top clubs. But just before that, this situation with the Glazers and the fact that, you know, they're taking so long to get this deal done, and there seems to be so much, I won't say infighting necessarily, but sort of a lack of continuity in terms of the decision of the family. Is it any surprise to you that this is taking this long? Because like you said, they don't need to sell. There's no imperative for them to sell like we saw with Chelsea. It seems like they can't agree on anything. Is this sort of unfolding the way you would kind of expect it to almost?
Well, I think if anybody's watched Succession on the American program, which is all about a family where you've got a father who dies and you've got 3 or 4 kids who are potentially going to inherit the consequences. It's difficult to get agreement within families, and that applies to non-football as well. You've only got to look at Liam and Noel, and they're always kicking off together as well. So I think there are challenges. Some of the Glazer children are not interested. They want to cash out. You've got Avram and Joel who think that there's still money to be made, and therefore they don't appear to be able to come to an overall agreement. You've got the Rain Group who are in theory acting on behalf of the Glazers as a whole. I've heard nothing but criticism of them from connections who I've got connections with, just the same as you have, I'm sure, Joe. So I think there's a lot of frustration, and there doesn't appear to be any leadership coming from one person who's saying this is the strategy. And then I think you've got to look at it from the point of view of the buyers. Both Ineos and Sheikh Jassim, they will have spent a fortune to date with lawyers and accountants and other business professionals trying to come up with a valuation. And every time they think they get close to a final bid, the Glazers move the goalposts.
Yeah, and just another question in terms of the potential value of United in years to come. Just your opinion on this, because obviously we're projecting and predicting the future here. Do you think that the sort of, I mean, almost bizarre influx of money that we're seeing from Saudi Arabia and how that has changed, for instance, the sport of golf and is influencing the sport of boxing? How do you see that changing the value and the prospect of football in the next few years, and potentially the price of Manchester United? Is that, again, this is your opinion, obviously we're looking ahead here, but how do you see that affecting things? Because something's going on there that is completely new to everyone, isn't it?
You're absolutely right, Joe. It is a potential disruptor, but I don't see it having any impact significantly on the Premier League. If you take a look at the attendances for matches in the Saudi Pro League last weekend, they averaged 6,500. Yeah, that's League One. I know the players are earning a fortune. There's no financial fair play to worry about. So I think players will see it as an option at some point in their career. But in terms of having credibility as a league, whereby, do you know anybody that has grown up in Gorton or Urmston saying, well, when I grow up, I want to play for Al Hilal? Even if they're a City fan, you'll have more respect for them. So players are going there. I've got no issue with the players taking the money. If somebody offered us to host this podcast and pay us £1 million a pop from Riyadh, the chances are we'd do it. So I'm not having a go at the players, but I don't see it as being a significant disruptor, because players are well paid. The average salary at Manchester United is around about £8 million a year. Even if you're offered double that, you can only have one house. You can only own one car at one time. So I don't see it as being a major disruptor, except for players when the manager doesn't want them, or they reach that stage in their career where they're looking for one final payday. You'll get the odd one moving on, but overall it's never been an issue in exactly the same way as loads of players going to Spain or Italy historically. That didn't have a negative impact on the Premier League itself when those two leagues were perhaps preeminent in Europe.
Yeah, and again, this is just a side that I've been wanting to ask you actually for a few weeks, and we haven't had you on. Is there a potential, do you think, that how we saw a similar thing with golf, of how essentially they built this rivalry with the PGA Tour? Live Golf kind of came in initially as an opponent and a rival to the Tour, but eventually almost sort of swallowed it up and became the Tour and is the kind of financial backing behind a lot of the PGA Tour now. Do you see a scenario where, in fact, that instead of it being a disruptor to the Premier League and European football, they create these relationships with UEFA, they become part of either, the Champions League or threaten a Super League. And actually, it could sort of, this money that is almost infinite, essentially, that's at the disposal of the Saudi League. Do you see that almost sort of catapulting football up another notch in terms of money, and sort of them coming into the European game rather than taken away from it?
I think you're right. We could see something different. I think the people who are most delighted by all of this are FIFA, because they're trying to add credibility to the FIFA World Club Championship, which is expanding to 32 teams in 2025. And again, if you as a United fan, you're not saying, well, that's the tournament that we want to be in. It's winning the Premier League, it's getting into the Champions League and making progress there is going to be your main focus. If all of a sudden we've now got a world competition which has got 2 or 3 clubs from the Saudi Pro League, you've got some big South American teams, you've got a dozen teams from Europe, that could become quite a sexy tournament. And therefore the money that has come from Saudi, which has allowed those clubs to compete, could change the face of what's going to be the most significant club competition on an international face. It's been the Champions League for years, but I can assure you, if FIFA make money from it the first time round as a 32 club tournament, they'll be wanting it not every 4 years, but then it'll be every 2, then it'll be every year, because they want to compete with the Champions League. So wait and see. Money changes everything. Money can buy everything, and the Saudi leagues have unlimited amounts.
Yeah. Very interesting. Just back to United specifically now then. Just this window has seemed so, seemingly at the start, it was, calculated. We're going after targets. If someone's too expensive, we move on to the next target. We get in Mount, we get in Onana, we get in Højlund relatively quickly. And then all of a sudden at the end of the window, there's this, we want a new centre-back, but we can't get rid of Maguire because his wages are too high. And then we want a new midfielder, but we can't afford Amrabat because we can't get rid of McTominay because his wages are too high. So we're going for loans for players who are, I know £30 million is a lot of money, but in Manchester United terms, having to loan a player that would only have cost you 30 million euros or pounds seems like, we're hearing FFP more talking about United than we are seemingly any other club. Why is it that United have struggled so much against, butting against FFP compared to the likes of Chelsea or even maybe Arsenal this summer? Why is it we're hearing that so much more with United?
Well, I think you've got to look at a couple of things which count against United. First of all, Manchester United has the highest wage bill in the Premier League, and that sort of addresses the issue which you raised, Joe, is that if you are a player for Manchester United, if you've got the chance of going elsewhere, you've then got that awkward decision: do you want to take a pay cut, or do you want guaranteed income on your payroll from Old Trafford for the next 2 years? So Manchester United is probably more of a destination club than some of the other clubs that we're looking at, who you could say, well, nobody's denying that Chelsea and Arsenal are small clubs, but they have often been seen as stepping stones. You've only got to look at the likes of Thierry Henry going from Arsenal to Barcelona. We had Eden Hazard going from Chelsea to Real Madrid. So are they big clubs? Yes. Are they the giants? I don't think so, and I don't think many people in football have the same view. So that's an issue for United in terms of they've got a cost base which is higher than other clubs. They've also, of course, got all of the debt, and the debt carries an interest cost. Now, compared to where we were under the early years of the Glazers, when they were paying interest on the PIK loans of over 14%, the interest is a lot lower than it used to be, but it's still swallowing up £20 million a year, on average, as far as your overall profit, which goes into your FFP calculations, is concerned. So you've got those issues, and then we've got the elephant in the room in terms of transfers. People are focusing very much on what's coming into Old Trafford, and that's understandable. Yeah. Where Manchester United really stand apart is what's going out. Chelsea have generated 5 times as much money over the course of the last decade as Manchester United have from player sales. And you look at some of those Chelsea player sales, I'm fingers crossed for you that it does work out, but I think the initial reaction, Mason Mount 55 million, you got your trousers taken down. Arsenal are probably feeling the same with Havertz. You've got, Hazard scored 4 goals in 4 seasons. So Chelsea have managed to get an awful lot of money for player sales, as have Arsenal. And we then come into the somewhat ludicrous way that the accounting works, is that if you sell a player, you get immediate gain. But when you buy a player, you spread the pain. So because Arsenal and Chelsea have both managed to sell players, and it's the same with City to a certain extent, if you sell Mason Mount as Chelsea for 55 million, that's pure profit. You buy players on 7-year contracts and you divide the cost by 7. So it allows you to spend £385 million on buying players based on the money coming in from the sale of Mason Mount. And that's where United have, I think, have fallen down. And then I think you've got to look, and again, look, you're a United fan, you know what's happening on the ground far better than I do. I'm just a teacher. But I can't think, as a football fan, I can't think of many players, with the perhaps exception of Fernandes, where I thought United have got a really good buy there. And you look at the players that have got, Pogba went on a free. You mentioned Harry Maguire. Fred's gone for next to nothing, and so on and so forth. And I think that has really counted against United. Something is wrong in terms of their ability to spot good players. And to get a profit on those when those players move on.
It's interesting as well, I think, just obviously from a financial perspective, it's obviously the case that United are struggling to do what you've just mentioned there. But there's also, I think, a negotiating perspective as well. There seems to be something lacking because, you look at some of the players that City have sold this summer. And their goalkeeper that they sold to Burnley for around £18 million, who I think had only ever played for Bolton as a professional in League One, and he's going for, I think he was something like the 7th most expensive goal or the 10th most expensive goalkeeper of all time, and he's only played at Bolton. You look at is it Cole Palmer as well that they've sold for £45 million to Chelsea, isn't it? I think so. Like again, promising young player, but. Certainly someone that hasn't fulfilled any real potential as of yet. It's all potential. And even when United were successful and, could sell players that were superfluous to the squad and there could still be this expectation that they would be very good, we always struggle to do that, to get good money for players. And I wonder what that is, if it's just contracts or if it's a mixture of things. Because I do feel as though there's a negotiating problem with United where, for whatever reason, where other clubs may get 15, 20 million, we're getting 6 or 7 million. Maybe it does just come down to the money of those contracts, but it always seems so frustrating when you see other teams getting good money for players who they don't want. And United are, scrambling to let people leave on a free and leaving by mutual decision and all this stuff. It's just, it's really frustrating. I saw a tweet from you a few days ago talking about this potential, and this is where I need your clarification. Is it the case that the Glazers could have been putting in more of their own money and have chosen not to? Obviously, we know they haven't put anything in. But is there potential as well in terms of missing revenue from what the owners should or could have been putting in over these years?
Yes, if you take a look at financial fair play from the point of view of the Premier League, you're allowed to lose £15 million over 3 years. But owners are allowed to chip in extra money, and the first £90 million over 3 years counts towards FFP. Now, we have seen that at other clubs. And you think about it, £90 million, it's not you can go and sign a pit player for £90 million because of this thing called amortization. If you sign a players for £300 million on 5-year contracts, that works out as £60 million a year. Plus you've got the £30 million, being chipped in from wages and so on. And you can be far better off. But the strategy of the Glazers from day one is to use Manchester United as a glorified hole in the wall machine. They've taken money out through management charges. They've taken money out through dividends. They've taken money out through selling shares when it suited them. Some of the Glazer family, and that means that Manchester United are in a slightly more complex position. I mean, to be fair, we've not seen a lot of money coming in from City's owners or from Liverpool's owners necessarily, but they have done it when required. And I think this one of the things that sets aside Manchester United. It's further complicated by being quoted on the New York Stock Exchange, because to have a fresh share issue to raise additional cash is actually quite a costly exercise when you've got all the compliance costs of being a listed company on an international stock market.
It's just every time we speak about the Glazers, they just see United as a vehicle for cash, don't they? There's no love, there's no fandom, there's no support, there's no anything, and there's never, like, sometimes you think, oh, people, non-United fans like to give United fans stick over what they say about the Glazers and how much we've sort of rallied against them over the last sort of 18 years. But they've done just literally nothing to help Manchester United in the time they've owned the club. It's just every possibility, every possible turn where they could have chipped in there or helped there, they've just never taken any chance to help United out. And it's just so frustrating when we get in these moments where, maybe United could have gone for Harry Kane this summer, or maybe United could have got in Amrabat slightly earlier, or, things could have looked so different if we'd have had an owner that was, let's say, just neutral and willing to do what was, required of them, let alone going above and beyond. It just feels as though we're being sort of hamstrung at all turns, really. Just back to the takeover thing. What do you think Man United's worth? This 10 billion thing, and it may not be the case, it may be a negotiating tactic, but there's clearly some disagreement within the Glazer family as to what United is worth and whether now is the time to sell. What do you think they should be expecting from the sale of Manchester United?
Well, if you take a look at the value of the club on the New York Stock Exchange, and then you add in the debt to get sort of the value of the club overall, I think we're probably looking somewhere in the region of 5 to 6 billion. And that in itself is quite a generous price. It still makes Manchester United worth 20 times the value of Newcastle United. So where they're getting these additional numbers from, it's certainly not in terms of profitability, because if you take a look at Manchester United's accounts since the Glazers acquired the club in 2005, overall they've just about broken even. Now, why would you go and pay £10 billion for a business which has made no profit in 18 years? It's a crazy thing to do. So trying to work out their strategy is difficult. And I appreciate your listeners won't know who the hell I am, but I'm a Brighton fan. We've got an owner who's a local lad that's put in 500 million quid into the club, and that's allowed the club to progress. And that's why we're currently got Manchester United's 2025 number 9 playing for us in the form of Evan Ferguson, because they've got a strategy of developing players.
Yeah, I like that. He just added another 30 million quid to his price tag with that hat-trick the other day as well, didn't he? Okay, so the Glazers, the offers have been roughly what the club should be worth. Presumably, Jim Ratcliffe and Sheikh Jassim, as you mentioned at the start of the video, think their offers are good offers and are worthy of buying Manchester United. How do you think they're going to be feeling now? Because it's not even that it's been a back and forth. We saw that between sort of November and April-ish. There was a new bid and rounds of bids, and I'm confident, you're confident, back and forth. We've just heard nothing for months. And it's getting to the point now where it almost feels as though they're just trying to slip back into, we own Manchester United and, we'll all forget about this whole we were going to sell the club thing. How do you think Sheikh Jassim and Jim Ratcliffe are feeling? Because surely they're almost as frustrated as United fans at this point.
I think to a certain extent they will have felt that they've been used, because if there has been a grand plan to not sell the club for less than 10 billion, then that should have been communicated in the first few days of this, and then everybody would have walked away, because I can't see anybody would have got near to that price. From the vague things that I hear, is that I think both parties, both Sheikh Jassim and Ineos and Jim Ratcliffe, both feel that they've put in very fair and very generous bids, which aren't very far apart. And I think they both got a bit fed up of the Rain Group coming back to them and saying, well, it's quite a good offer, just a little bit more, just a little bit more. And I don't know whether there's some sort of gentleman's agreement between the pair of them that, right, these are our final offers, we're not going to go any further. But certainly the noises coming out from both parties has been completely silent. for the last 2 or 3 months, which indicates, I think, they're digging their heels in because they feel that the way that they've been treated by the Glazers and by the Rain Group is lacking respect. And you can have a separate discussion about what you think about the potential owners, but they have conducted themselves, from what we can make out, professionally. They have gone through the due process, and now that they've been left in limbo, everybody thought that the deal would have been sorted by, and which would have given the new owners the opportunity to put in more money straight away in the form of new shares, which would have addressed the issue, Joe, that we've been talking about in terms of the restrictions of the transfer window, and B, to try to change the culture of the club, because there are things at Manchester United which are not right, and you know what they are, and I know what they are, and we can't say them in public, but this is Manchester United, and it's being treated as if it's a sort of an unwanted Christmas present by the Glazers, who don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, it's just sad, really, isn't it? Unfortunately, you've given us a lot of answers, but the main answer that we all want can only come from the Glazers, and it doesn't seem like we're hearing that. But thank you very much for coming on and clearing up what was going on with the transfer window, what was going on with this sort of 10 billion estimation that no one can really quite see why the Glazers think that the club is going to be worth that. And thank you for giving us a little bit of clarity on what may be to come with the Saudi League and all that stuff as well. So thank you very much, Kieran Maguire, for coming on. Cheers.
Cheers, Joe. All the best to everybody at the Paddock.
Thank you very much. This has been a one-on-one interview with football finance expert Kieran Maguire from the University of Liverpool. Hit subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and we'll see you in a bit.